Hello and welcome to Into Your Life podcast. I'm Lenka and I'm joined here by my wonderful co-host Natalie.
Hi, we invite you to join our weekly conversations about finding more life in one's life.
Well, what does it actually mean?
We have discussions with guests about ways to live happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives, both personally and professionally.
That sounds great. Let's go.
Welcome, everyone, and I'm excited for today's guest. Today, we have Robert Fisher, one part of a wonderful company, Hawk and Heath, and we will be talking about forest bathing. And I could go on a tangent about forest and nature and outdoors and all of that. But if you're listening to the podcast, you know that this is a big topic for us. You know that it's a big topic for me. And today is not about me. Today it's about Robert. So welcome, Robert. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely. I've been really excited actually today to come in and have a chat. Any opportunity.
Guys, to come on for about, I think, a year since I started having conversation with Alexandra to come on. And she's like, well, we're doing this app and we're doing this book and we're doing this. I'm so excited to finally
You've actually diverted me from my book. It's the tricky chapter 2, honestly. The other chapters are fine. There's this really tricky chapter 2, all about setting intentions and how to do that based around forest bathing, because that's not part of forest bathing. It's something we feel is really, really important. The more business people we worked with, this idea of their brain is racing at the point when they arrive. So we thought, how are we going to slow people down? Because those of us that love nature know being within it and being slow and being mindful and we get it. But if you come out of Leeds, come out of Birmingham, or and you walk into Sutton Park, where we've run things with several charities down near Sutton Coldfield, they are there and they're just buzzing, talking, really worried about what am I going to do next, and I suppose we've got to go and do this, have we? Go and talk to a tree. Do you want me to hug a tree? Do I need swimming costume on? All of that. And then it's that, how do you slow and stop being like a spaniel, I would call it, and actually be that quiet, gentle person. So chapter 2 is all about how to trigger being calm and being focused and being aware of what's around you when it's the last thing. Most ambitious, dynamic, busy people who love what they're doing, they love their job, they love their business, they love what they go and they love their, getting in 9 to 5 and working. They enjoy it. It's fab. It's great. It's stressful. It's difficult. I've got so much to do. And then suddenly I'm saying, would you mind slowing down? How do you take a child who wants to run at 100 miles an hour to actually slow and be gentle and calm? We run lots of different sessions with people in the Scouts and Cubs, and you take out 25 sort of brownies or cubs, and they want to zip round, they want to climb a tree, but actually they get mental health. Children get mental health totally. And you say, this is all about mental health. So just do what we're saying. Comes from Japan. Let's try it. And that's brilliant and fab. So we have much need to forest bathe ourselves in order to keep us calm and focused in on our business development. So confidence hasn't been the issue. It's knowing how to connect and the marketing, and there are other elements, aren't they, to a business where it goes beyond the you and your thing you love. It's into suddenly, oh gosh, we've got to work out what's the right price. We've got to work out how this and how that works, and all of these are little stresses. And then what's funny is we can sit and go, well, we've had a real meeting about that, and that's been really difficult because this is new, a completely new way. I mean, we've been teachers I've been a teacher for 30-something years, different capacities and different schools. And Ali worked in sort of countryside management. then went to do sort of outdoor education, then came into schools as a teacher. So we all done all this. We can teach you anything and train you to do things and explain things and draw on science and bring that all in. It's incredibly difficult to suddenly then adapt that into a completely different framework. So I haven't got a head teacher and a deputy head telling me what to do. I haven't got plans and it's all there. Suddenly I've got to work out how to connect with CEOs or HR managers, well-being coaches. It's suddenly a very, very different thing. So yes, we have been dynamic for the last 12 months. And yes, we do need to spend some time focusing in now, which is lovely. Well, it's lovely to come on a nice podcast and chat.
So we've got a idea of the sort of behind the scenes, like you said, with the children and everything. So what is it? What is it that you do? We know there's a book, we know there's PDFs. So what is it that you do? What is forest bathing? And how did this idea start for you? How did you come about and creating this space, this place, and teaching people about forest bathing?
Well, we started off I was Robert Fisher and I taught horticulture and outdoor education. And my boss at the time was Ali, and Ali Foster was my sort of boss, my immediate boss, and we would sit and plan what we were doing. And we were then, money was beginning to arrive into school to do more and more outdoor education. And we were sent off. We headed off to Bolling Park in Bradford to meet someone called Lily Horseman. She's amazing, head of Forest School Association, Forest School trainer, and very keen on mental health and physical health of children. And so absolutely superb. So we have amazing conversations. We walked in on the very first day and we all sat down, as you would, nice horseshoe, all sat there inside a lovely little hut in Bradford Council, nice cafe next door, beautiful space. And there was a phone call, and Paul, who was sat 2 chairs down, stood up, walked out the room and went, "Oh, I'm really sorry. You know, this Chinese virus thing, it's arrived at my school. I've got to go." No one sat on that chair. It was just there, spare for the rest of the time. Our first contact with COVID. And this was months before we all then had all the, we went away, we came back, and obviously post Christmas, all lockdowns, etc. So I began to do primarily forest bathing forest school within the school grounds with children that at the time were primarily drawn from a special school, very autistic, often very, very aggressive. Triggers, if if the wrong triggers were pushed, then suddenly there we were. It could be quite aggressive and violent. And I would take whole groups out where people are going, "Oh, how can you take them out? They're really, dynamic." And I think, well, we'll see what happens. And what happened? They'd be sat there. They would light fires. They would use knives and use all sorts of things. I was told, don't now. And they were calm. They were focused, and it was extraordinary. And I would sit there going, I wonder why. Why was that happening? It's all right saying, we all know, isn't it? Going out into nature, very common sense, it's all going to be fine. But why? Actually, scientifically, what was going on for what we knew were generally can be, they're wonderful kids, loved working with them. But if wrong thing happened, wrong time, sometimes unmanageable for us, because it's things outside and the school, etc., could become very, very aggressive and angry and distressed. Why did that never happen when we were outside? And that began a thought process of what the causes were, the real triggers of how was that? Because it just seemed to happen. Like, boom, you take them out, they're comfortable. And that actually, my younger son, Mark, gave me a this was right at the beginning of COVID at all. They were saying they're using this as a way of helping people's health and well-being. But can you see there, they're mentioning that being in nature washes out the phrase used by Dr. Chin Lee, a man who I've now spoken to and had lots in email exchanges with, who's this big man in forest bathing. What is forest bathing? What is Shinrin Yoku? And the point was, he was saying that through the science behind Shinrin Yoku and forest bathing, we can explain why the children you work with, and he'd go, Robert, I can tell you why. This is what is happening. When you absorb the chemicals, when you're absorbing the bacteria, when you're absorbing what you can see and feel in nature, there are chemical changes that are happening within those children. So when we were there working with children, we were working with young adults and teenagers, when we were working with people up to about the age of 20, you could see that that is what was happening. And it began to answer this question, why this was happening. So it was that relationship between forest school, which you're doing with very young children, and then I would take kids out who were very, very young, and everyone, they'd scream and shout and run around. Actually, they wouldn't. They'd sit down, they'd watch, they'd listen, they'd be much more engaged. So we found we could create literacy, numeracy, sorry, it is at school, so it's all about, unfortunately, leads into learning objectives. But we could set up programs of work where children that people did not believe could do things were then suddenly doing them because they were doing them outside. And this was the science behind forest bathing, this Japanese therapeutical technique that started by pure chance in the 1980s. And it was, they had a fantastic Zoom with 4 very, very people in the Japanese government, as was, and Dr. Chin Lee, where they literally just laughed. It was just something it just came like, he said, it's like he walked into work, did the health minister, and said, oh, let's send people outside and see, does that make them feel better? And they just set up this whole thing. Shinrin Yoku is a made-up name. It's completely made up. It's never been there in Japanese until he said, well, we'll call it forest bathing, well, Shinrin Yoku, which is literally, its translation into English is forest bathing. The sort of Shinrin means wood or forest, multiple meanings within Japanese. The Japanese language, every symbol has multiple meanings. So it's beautiful for poetry and gorgeous to look at. So fantastic art, beautiful in terms of its emotional power. So you have Shinrin, which is wood or forest, and then bathing looks a little bit like a house with rain coming on it, because effectively it means to stand and receive, like having a shower. So you're showering yourself in the forest atmosphere, immersing yourself in it. We just thought it would do people good. So excellent. So Chin Lee, well, not yet doctor, came over from China, started his PhD, was coming along, went, what is this Shinrin Yoku? Can I have a look? Then just simply said, has anyone done any data collecting? Has anyone done any analysis of what's? And the answer was, well, no, it just works. So 20 years in Japan, most companies engage in forest bathing in some way or another, some more than others. Toyota, Sony, Fujitsu, Mitsubishi, they're really hot on it. Toyota, are now looking to how to bring it within their industrial plants. They have it within their offices and everyone goes out. In the workers from the factories go out into woodlands regularly, but they actually want to bring them in. So how do we bring it? So they're saying in a conversation I was having, people were saying, well, Toyota found it quite easy to adapt office space, but now they want to look at how do you adapt factories. So it's very ingrained within Japanese society, but you would immediately think, oh, this is ancient and it's whatever. There are elements of it that are obviously, and they are in all the way throughout Europe and America too. We've had this tradition of, but they felt that with the urbanization, people had lost an element of that. And obviously Japan's very urbanized. And they are beginning to now bring more green space into their urban cities because of the impacts of it. But what Dr. Chin Lee began to recognize is that there are structured practices, there are ways and means of bringing the impact quicker and in a more solid way. And he's demonstrated over, since 2012 was when they set up the Institute for Forest Medicine. So it's still very young science, really, if we think about what is clearly an ancient practice, but the science is trying to understand exactly what is happening. So we love it, we do it, but why? What is fundamentally happening? And that's kind of where Hawke & Heath started as a forest school. So we said, oh, we'll run forest schools at the weekends. We'll do them at school in school holidays and carry on working in schools in the meantime. But then we suddenly looked and thought, once I trained as a forest bathing guide, that there's a message here that is actually fundamental to changing the way our society functions. That actually all of us from a very, very young age need to be taught when we're 3. When you arrive at reception, you really ought to be shown how to forest bathe. You should be shown, and it's not what happens is this natural trigger that even very, very young children get immediately, they get it. And if you can nurture that thought of, oh, right, so if so they get this concept of the interconnections of trees and, oh, I need to be nice to trees. Yeah, you need to be nice to trees. Love them, be kind to them, lovely, because they give you so much. And the science of what they give us, we've kind of known this for centuries. Humans have known this for centuries. But our disconnect into urban spaces, this techno-stress, as the Japanese termed it, for us, we talk about burnout, anxiety, depression. Very high in inflammation in our bodies, low immune responses, issues with blood pressure, cardiovascular, and blood sugar. Blood sugar's my story. I got suddenly, in all this time period, suddenly told you're diabetic, and it was so bad, suddenly caught by a very random blood test. There was nothing in how I felt, nothing in the way I was eating or my lifestyle. There was nothing. They went through my lifestyle and went, oh, not sure how to change. Went through my gut, not sure what to change. But what had to change was what's on the wall behind me, forest bathing. And I'm absolutely certain that's what's helped me. It's helped Ali, whose story is more depression and anxiety. And so within the Hawke & Heath company, we've morphed from, used to say, forest school, forest bathing. Now we're forest bathing solely.
Could we look a little bit into the neuroscience behind the science of, as you said, it's an ancient practice. It's something that I would say we all instinctively know that nature is good for us. We're born in nature. We're civilizations that have started in nature. But with this modern world, we are, as you said, urbanization, we're disconnecting from nature. And some people, they're easy. You tell them, go out to nature, and they will do it because they're like, sure, makes sense. And some people like, well, I need a bit more. So could we look a little bit into what's actually happening to our bodies physiologically, on the nervous system, why nature, why forest? And also you mentioned that there could be different modalities then to it, different systems, different practices within the concept of forest bathing to be it for younger, older people, healthy people, or people who are struggling with something. So could we look at some of the specifics, please?
Naturally, where humans have come from, as you said, are these green environments. And obviously those green environments are slightly different throughout the world, or if you look in the UK, our green environments are very, very different. A lot of them now, unfortunately in the UK, but less so in lots of other countries, the ancient woodland has been removed. So we are now down to about 2% of our ancient woodland. So ancient woodland means woodlands that have largely been untouched for 400-ish years. That gets even more complex if you take a place like Yorkshire, where ancient woodlands were often then used for, logged and used to then for the last Australian Revolution. The reason you go through, you can see the coppicing that went on in order to be able to construct all of the, bobbins, etc. things. So it is difficult to see exactly in the UK what you'd call ancient or pristine woodlands. But green spaces, and the key is green, that chlorophyll green. Now we know that green varies greatly in colour. And if you go out now, this is the thing, I take people out in January, people would think our woodlands now are primarily brown. They're not, they're primarily green, even now. So you can go in now and there is loads of holly, loads of ivy, loads of yew and conifers. So a good mixed woodland, that is what we're looking for. But also when we look at the net, what I'll go on to describe is these scientifically shown and the natural neurosciences. We don't need to be thinking in terms of you've got to go to ancient woodlands. There's very little. Ancient pristine woodlands are extraordinarily rare in this country. That does not mean we don't get the benefits. We do. So if you go to Saltaire, which is near to us, we have Roberts Park. Lots of people will talk about Roberts Park. And when you walk in there, some I'm not exactly sure who it was, but they've sent tree hunters, plant hunters all over the world in the Victorian times, and they've gone, oh, bring us anything interesting you can find. So you go into Saltaire, you go into loads of British parks. There are extraordinary trees and shrubs and plants from all over the world. They are perfect to go to. So when we did our forest school training, I said it was Bolling Park in Bradford. Bolling Park is huge. It is massive. It is full of some of the greatest trees. Honestly, I could take you to there. There is a tiny little space where there is a horseshoe where when it was planted, it must have been, we've got these wonderful conifers from all over the world. There must be 40 of them or so, and they planted them in a horseshoe. You could go there for half an hour a day and follow the different practices they have in Japan, and you will get all the benefits you need. So neurologically, physiologically, gain all of the benefits. And that comes through sniffing, touching, looking, observing. Yeah, getting your nose in and really sniffing the trunk, really squeezing and then sniffing the trees. And what was extraordinary, I took a group of Bradford Council workers for Better Place Bradford there. And they all arrived and they're all quite sober and quiet and all. Within 5 minutes of all sniffing the different trees, they were all giggling because the phytoncides, these are the chemicals that trees, all plants, ivy, holly, all plants. I'm assuming grass does. I think every plant does. All plants produce phytoncides, and they're all slightly different. Hence the essential oils, and essential oils are all different. And that's a wonderful rabbit hole to fall down in order to bring them home, because you then sniff. And what you do, you're sniffing the phytoncides, you're sniffing what trees produce as part of their immune system. All those the chemicals that they are producing are fighting off what they perceive as possible threats for themselves. What we now know is they communicate and they release it at different times. So I do wonder whether suddenly Robert brings a group in and we start sniffing one tree, and that tree says, oh, got a bunch of weirdos all squeezing me, and they start releasing even more, because that's precisely what happens when deer come in, and if they start eating it, the others produce more and more of all those different chemicals, which to the deer makes those trees then, or those plants, not taste as nice, so they then move on, hence the grazing plants move on, grazing animals move on. So when we go in to sniff, of course, we are sniffing all of those, and each one of them smells different. So they're ones you'll like and ones you won't like, but they are all having a big impact on your mind and on your body. And without a man, woman, and there were a couple of children, they were all giggling and laughing and smiling. They changed. They were suddenly gone from quite sober, quiet professional people into a bunch of giggly little schoolboys and schoolgirls having a great fun. Come and sniff this. Come and sniff this one. I love. That's my favourite. This is so. The social element of forest bathing is what I love too, although we would generally urge people to do it in quite a solitary way. They were very dynamic in there, but you're learning and you're feeling, and big impacts on things like anxiety and depression. In terms of depression, I've got piled up here a big wodge of it's metadata in Japan, where they've analysed from all over the world different things. So it describes in there where they perceive that people that have suffered from depression who engage consistently in forest bathing are 50% less likely to have a recurrence. And there's not a drug out there that will have that kind of an impact. I think that's an extraordinary thing to better say. They also have loads of different research projects all over the world where people that require counselling, and we all do at some stage in our lives, if they do the counselling and forest bathing at the same time, the counsellors and the patient, the person that they're working with, they all say it works better because they're forest bathing at the same time. So while they're thinking, while they're talking, they're sniffing, they're absorbing. The green has a profound impact. Chlorophyll green has a profound impact on our mental well-being because it's a reminder of the ancient worlds that we came in. If you actually use green and paint walls green and then put lots of plants in, it does the same thing. It's triggering. But you do need to have visited those places in order for the trigger to happen internally. But you go out, you sniff, you do it. So that green is profound. The sniffing of the chemicals, but it's not just phytoncides. There's lots of the old friends hypothesis of being in nature. So the old friends hypothesis is this concept that phytoncides and the bacteria, the viruses, the fungi, you're absorbing them. A lot of them your body actually needs. A lot of them your body doesn't want. So the ones that you need, oh, brilliant, we'll use you, come in, you boost our immune system, you increase actually our sense of happiness, help us to deal with anxiety and depression. But the ones that you don't want, your body fires up your immune system. That will also aid increases in things like cytokines to identify the inflammation. You go in, you deal with the issue, and then it shuts down. So one of the things that occurred really with COVID was this idea of cytokine storms. And they do happen, and we all have them. We have them with flu, etc. So some of these very powerful viruses that attack us, like flu, like COVID, what happens there is that your body keeps producing the cytokines because it is unaware you've dealt with the inflammation. Your body fights itself. Obviously it's not pleasant to talk about that whole time period that we've gone through. But what was found is that people that forest bathe, people that spend a lot of time outside, some of you will, lots of people do it without knowing they're forest bathing. They're just out, they're calm, they sit, they look, they what. That's what it's all about. But what happens is that your body learns to, it escalates your immune system, you will fight off what it is, and then it calms down. So you don't then get the cytokine storms. And generally, Professor Ming Kuo from University of Illinois stated that what forest bathing does is delay death, which are wonderful. I very rarely quote that, but she said in particular, what's important to understand is cytokine storms are extraordinarily rare. They're not rare in the population. Generally, unfortunately, our urbanized population, it's not rare, but for people that forest bathe, it's incredibly rare. So psychologically, neurologically, it returns you to where we should be. UEA did a big meta-analysis. What UEA found in their research is that forest bathing has a positive impact on them all. Scientifically, being in nature is really good for you, full stop.
So what I'm hearing is, to simplify, summarize my understanding, it's big woodlands, ancient, pristine are the best. We not all of us can find them. Any kind of a nature, be it our local park, be it a nearby little forest or anything that you can find. If there's nature, if there's plants all year round, go out, be present, sniff, touch, sit, observe. So I'm getting mindfulness meditation elements in there, just to be surrounded, not on our phones, not talking to each other all the time, just literally like kind of imagining like letting the forest wash, the plants wash all over me. I think that's where the bathing comes in. It's not like getting naked in a swimming suit and running around like a crazy fairy.
I never have. My answer to that is, if that's really what you want to do, I'm not going to stop you, but I wouldn't advise it. There's all sorts of ticks now, aren't there? I just you've got to be careful. So you can go as a family, and you can make it dynamic. You can make it enjoyable. You can go out with your mates and sit around and have a laugh. Please just get out. Yes, I accept the fact that if we notice the small things and really spend time with them, that gives us that profound meditative advance, and it's really good. And that, yeah, but taking your kid out and sitting and staring at ivy leaves and wondering where the fairies live, and I love doing that. Let's make a bird's nest. Let's go and find a favorite tree. A study found, this is the extraordinary things and the little things, and you read these and you go, no way, but you're so happy it's true. But if a child has a favorite tree, they are far less likely when they're a teenager to suffer from mental health issues. And that was a study in Denmark. Now, I look at that and go, I'm so pleased, isn't that fact? But and I was in a clothes shop in Lincoln, believe it or not, and this bloke looked at me and said, oh, my 1 and 2-year-old, they both have favorite trees and they want to go and sit in there. So it's a good thing. I said, yeah, it's a brilliant thing. I said, I've got a favorite tree too. It's really good for you. So we have a whole things about favorite trees, because you should have favorite trees. We call them the treasures, the things that matter to you. And sharing that with your children, sharing that with your local children, a teacher taking the class out. Yes, I know it's going to be dynamic. It's not going to be quiet. But actually, the more we research, trees are quite noisy. Everything makes noise. I do a thing called Finding Your Place. We're very, very big mammals, and we're really loud. And everything's noisy. The way we breathe, it's noisy. the way our hearts and everything. Horses apparently can hear your heart and therefore analyze whether you're stressed or not stressed from about 3 to 4 meters away, which is an extraordinary thing. So that's why you have to breathe carefully and lower your heart rate and be calm before walking towards a horse that you're about to ride. It will assume if you have got a very fast heart rate and you're breathing a bit quick, there's something to panic about. They're integrated to humans, like dogs, and are very integrated to us. They're very aware of our emotions. So we have to control them, which is why we talk a lot about breath and breathing, nasal breathe, please nasally breathe all the time. Natural movement, natural breath, breathing through our nose. We are not an animal that should be breathing through our mouth. We drink, we speak, we eat through our mouth, we breathe through our nose. Nasal breathing. And that's when you absorb the chemicals, the bacteria, the fungi, the viruses in the woodlands, or your park, or by the canal bank, river bank. I think we commented today, didn't we, Lenka, on somebody's had a big waterfall, and how wonderful. Never quite sure with LinkedIn whether it's today or well, anyway, I commented on it today. And saying how wonderful blue-green is, because it is, and going to the beach and all of that, and negative ions, superb. Agitated water, go near it, breathe in the negative ions. This is where you need to be breathing them in. So the impact here is not as positive. Breathe here.
Talking about the green and the breathing, I mean, we've had a podcast about breathing, and we've read James Nestor's book about breathing. So we get the breathing.
See the copy there.
But one thing I wanted to ask you, and I've just been thinking about this, is you mentioned the green, the ancient woodlands, and green. And I'm originally from South Africa, and Africa is quite brown. So my question is, a lot of the trees can be very brown, especially if it hasn't rained in a while. And yes, you can find the green in that. But what about things like the aloes or the cactus, or what do they call them, the succulents? We get a lot of that in Africa. They're beautiful and they're green. Would that help, or does it have to be trees and then trying to find that green in the trees? It's just because you mentioned green as opposed to just the trees.
Yeah,
so I'm just
other countries
of sort of more the people who are listening who from Africa or from drier climates. And I'm going back for a month next month, which I'm really excited about. And there are green spaces, but they water them a lot. They actually have to really make sure that they water them so that they are green. But what about out in nature? The green doesn't happen so much. There is a lot of brown. What would you do then?
Now that is a really interesting question, and one I've actually posed to. She's a well-being coach in South Africa. Her name's Hannah, and I'm actually speaking to her on the 24th of January. And she's put a variety of different people who suddenly joined me on LinkedIn. I was like, oh, these different well-being coaches from all over Africa. And that is exactly the question I'm going to pose. And so all I can ever do is pose a question for a gap. For my personal perception is that every single time I'm speaking to, let's say, Dr. Chin Lee or in Japan, they simply use this hesitation, which is, we've only really tested trees, and it's really hard one, because I'd be say, even here, so you go through and you say, oh, there's this, and I'd say, but you've got trees completely covered in ivy. The Woodland Trust will say to you, there's ivy, it's covering these trees. If you've got 6 to 8 trees and they're all covered, it's probably the same ivy plant. So you've got very large ivy plant covering the trees. So you've got big bulk, and they would describe it's huge bulk, huge mass of leaf and leaf matter. Obviously, it's predominantly green, but in the winter, And it's also of age. So it said, we know we have ivies, and because of the way they're growing, they're at least 400 years old. So all of those triggers are that it's age and it's bulk. You've got to have huge volume, big volume, and age. And then you're getting enough phytoncides to absorb. Okay. So then I've asked other sort of simple questions. Well, then, but when you walk through the grassy meadows, and Hannah would describe to me, said, oh, a huge percentage of the year around where she's living, and I'm sorry, it's in South Africa, and it's not Cape Town. It's a bit, but anyway, my geography of South Africa is limited. And she was saying around where we are, there aren't a lot of trees, but what you've got are huge meadows, and they're often full of wildflowers. And for the vast bulk of the year, they're predominantly green. She said, I know personally, we haven't got the testing machines out there, but if I go and sit in there, then I feel amazingly wonderful, happy, joyous, all of those giggly responses, all of that. So my instincts are, it's not just trees, it's not just plant, it is plants, it is more broad, it isn't just that, but it is related to chlorophyll. So I've then asked the question, right, so what happens when you live in countries where there is the predominance of brown? So I've flown into Chicago and you've looked at it and it is predominantly brown. There it is, it's all brown. So what happens then is that where in hunter-gatherer times they would have moved? So is that part of this process where in the past the hunter-gatherers, they moved, didn't they? So if you had if it was that dry season, well, on the whole, you didn't hang around then, did you? You moved. So I don't know. And you know what? That's that frontier of science where I might need a bit of confidence coach building here, but where you have to just go, well, hold on, wait a minute. We don't know. I genuinely don't know. So is this green? Was that the trigger for, right, now let's move? Was that the hunter-gatherer flow? Was that, if we looked at and analysed that, are we looking at the flow in the same way as you might now look at how do the animals are moving? How are the birds moving? Is this the triggers? And then that's that whole thing of, oops, do we need to then rethink the whole issues of that? Like you say, you end up having to water a lot or what have you, or maybe that's the forest bathing indoors solution, and etc.
I would just say be careful when sniffing a cactus.
Yes, I would be incredibly careful. But so I think that's that frontier world where it's wonderful that we can be in it, because we often talk about the frontier as being like space or the whatever, but actually, do you know what? Around us there are many adventures we should be having to truly understand the science of the world we should be living in. Or as Neil deGrasse said, it's far better, far quicker, far cheaper, far more moral to terraform the Earth than it would be to terraform Mars so we can move there because we've destroyed the Earth.
I also think that it's the different climates, different ways of living, there's different people. I mean, if you think about the deserts, the Bedouin, they just go, they travel a lot, and it's about finding those oases that they can find, and but they can go for ages just sand. I mean, there's no green. At least in Africa you can find the green, even if it's a blade of grass, but in the desert it's brown. So it will be interesting to see as time goes by and you ask these questions, is forest bathing more than just the green trees? Because it's come from Japan, and obviously Japan has the green trees. Maybe if it had come from Egypt, it would be the beach sand that would be the forest bathing. But I would like to think, and this is just my personal opinion, and just me, is having seen those trees in Africa. I mean, you get the baobab tree, which looks like, well, the folklore is that God got angry and he pulled out the tree and he put it upside down because nobody was appreciating the leaves. And it looks like a tree that has been turned upside down.
Yeah.
But these trees, you can have 20 people holding hands, stretching around it, and you can't even get around these trees. I mean, they are ancient, and there's got to be something in that. And I think that any plant that gives you that joy, or calms you down, or breathes in something, just being out in nature, whether it's a desert or an ancient forest or by a waterfall or the seaside, I think it can all give you different things, and that appreciation for just slowing down, breathing through your nose, and just taking time to reconnect with being human. But it will be interesting to know what answers you get. And obviously, I'm going to go around sniffing trees in South Africa when I go back.
You need to.
I'll skip the cactus. I have had that experience with cactus, and
you can eat them. They're lovely. But there's something popped into my mind. I was in Paris in a park, and there was, I believe they called it the cedar of Lebanon. But I feel that actually the tree isn't predominantly in Lebanon. I think it's more in Libya. And it had the most extraordinary and powerful scent of any tree I've ever. It was extraordinary. It's the most powerful scent. So maybe you may have fewer trees, but those trees that you go to have a stronger scent, stronger phytoncides. The stronger ones, so yew tree for yews in Britain, have extraordinarily powerful phytoncides. If you sit underneath a yew tree for a couple of hours, there is the strong possibility that you'll hallucinate. They're that powerful. They believe that's why Druids began to think they were a source of incredible power, and they were eternal and immortal, and because they do live a long time, and you can't tell, they don't have rings in the same traditional sense, but they're incredibly powerful. This cedar of Lebanon, I believe, I'd have to double check, I'll get back to you about it, but it was extraordinary. I mean, the smell was absolutely extraordinary, and it was really loved by ancient people for populations. They used it a lot in medicine, etc. So I wonder if you get these oases which are full of much more powerful phytoncides.
Well, it also gets our listeners, thinking.
Yeah, pondering and thinking, yeah.
Get them out there sniffing and seeing, because we have listeners in different parts of the world, and it will be interesting to see what they are experiencing and what they think or feel. So listeners, go out there and sniff and let us know from different climates.
But do you think it's also, there's another thing, we think our woodlands are really brown and boring and whatever, and when you go in and you actually do that, but so you have this mindset of, so British woodlands are very brown this time of the year, deciduous trees, no leaves, there's no point going in, be muddy, yucky, whatever. You go in, it's nothing like it. It's completely the opposite. It's extraordinary. So we have images, don't we, as soon as you say, oh, hot countries, somewhere like, oh, Spain, whatever. Well, you go to Spain, you go to the Alhambra, it's 40 degrees, but the woodlands there are absolutely stunning and extraordinary.
It's not necessarily hot countries. I think it's dry climates where they have a lot of drought, where they don't have a lot of rain.
But you can have a mindset that there's they're not going to be anything. There's not a lot going on. Nature's going to be a bit diminished there. And actually, when you go there, it's not. It's exciting and it's invigorating and it's extraordinary. I'd forgotten about the woodlands in Spain. I'd forgotten about the quantity of nature that can be there, because in my mindset, it's, it's all going to be like a desert, isn't it, down there? It's all so hot, and it's whatever, and it's nothing like that once you get there. So I think, yeah, we need to talk about what are the treasures where we see them, and move away perhaps from some of the mindsets. Yeah, so Hannah was telling me, no, if you come out here, you'll be quite surprised how dynamic and extraordinary the landscapes are here. And they vary over the months, but I believe, she said, I think actually it's right. This is where the forest bathing, which is where we all, it's a bit of a misnomer. It's nature bathing, really. It's going out into those that matter to you and are your spaces. And you might find there's fewer phytoncide producing plants, but what they are producing is extraordinarily powerful. Maybe that's a question.
It's where then the mindfulness element to me comes in. It's the observation, it's the being present outdoors in whatever nature we have around. Like even in here in the Czech Republic, we now have layers of snow, but yet we still have some evergreen trees that will be green, or that used to be, lush and green during the spring and summer, are now covered in snow and they're brown and white, but yet is the surrounded by nature and exploring whatever that we have, because as humankind we do live around the whole world quite successfully, thriving in different kind of climates. So there has to be something that sustains us in any kind of an environment. That to me it's then all about the mindfulness, the paying attention to details, to observing and just immersing ourselves, and using all our senses into whatever it is that we have available.
Norway, where I've been to Norway in the winter, and it's just extraordinary. And you'd sit there and go, well, a lot of the trees, they're just white, white trees, literally. It's just stunning. Well, who wouldn't want to spend time there? Who wouldn't feel better having gone? Who wouldn't feel better? And then you'd find school groups heading out with loads of teenagers out into the wilds of Norway. It's just extraordinary. And you'd look at that time and you say, oh no, surely it'd be a lot better to be there when it's light. No, it's extraordinary, beautiful. And the water and the way and the mirror imaging and the ice. No, I would, there's got to be huge, well, we settled, there must be massive benefits being in all of these dynamic environments. And part of the reason why we're called hawk and heath is it's this idea of connecting to your locality. So if you live in and around the Yorkshire sort of dales and moors where I live, then the phrase hawk and heath, it kind of sums up that landscape. It's lots of heathland, and we're surrounded by red kites and hawks all the time. So that's why so the idea would be, we've always encouraged people, is to think about, well, how in a couple of words would you describe where you live? So your connection point. So for me, the phrase hawk and heath conjures landscape images that are very treasured to me because they're where I live. Wherever I am in the world, hawk and heath conjures up landscape images. So whether it's dry stone wall and sheep, whatever it is, sand and upside down trees. I mean, that image is, I think, and that's the key element, is that images can even conjure up those positive parasympathetic triggers. They calm you and they think you, because they are images you own of your place, and having an idea of your place is incredibly important. And I'm comfortable you could talk to anyone, even Bedouins, and they would say, right, yeah, because wherever I am, if I'm in the city, I have to be there. I bet, sand and oasis would conjure up an image for them, or their choice, not mine, their choices of imagery absolutely would then bring that calmness wherever they happen to find themselves. So I can think hawk and heath, and I'm in the middle of London, and it's I don't know why anyone wants to live there. Anyway, Hawken Heath, that sort of, and you got all the buses and the noise and the whatever. Hawken Heath triggers a parasympathetic response. So language, imagery, the way you describe things that matter to you, that are treasures to you in terms of nature, also has that same neurological impact.
And that makes total sense. And I mean, this is such a fascinating topic, and I think we've shared a lot of questions out there for our listeners to think about and to mull over. But one thing that we always ask of our guests is, have you got a final sort of nuggets that you'd like to share, or is there something we haven't asked yet that you're just thinking, I need to share this information? Or do you have some top tips on how we can do the forest bathing? This is your space now to share those last little bits of teacher nuggets that we can get out of you before we wrap up.
Teacher nuggets.
just something that's coming to your mind now.
I've always, whenever I'm talking to people about all of this, it's so important, because I'm talking to you, and the wonders of technology. I don't actually know where you are in the world, and you may come from Suffolk, but actually you're in New York at the moment, or wherever Lenka is in the world. We can be all over, so you can talk to different people. But it's so important to begin to understand, where are those green spaces, where are those places of nature that you can connect with, and to conjure up an image in your mind of somewhere that's very close to your home, that you love, you treasure. You can now, if you just paused a moment, you can picture it. So where would you go and stand? What would you see? What would it look like? What would it feel like? Where is that place near to your home? Wherever you happen to work, and for a lot of people it can be both now, isn't it, the hybrid working, but wherever you tend to work or travel to in order to work, again, do some research, find green spaces. You'll be amazed, even if you're in the middle of a city. So I just said about London, but actually, if you go on the top of a building to look across London, it's an extraordinarily green city. Wherever you are in London, Birmingham, Manchester, Istanbul, wherever you walk out, you can find a green space. You can find a tree to go and sit under. You can go and find thing. And Woodlands Trust for the UK, there must be equivalents. You can even go on there and find ancient trees near to wherever you are. So if you want to go and sit under an ancient tree, you can find one. If you can, normally there'll be one near you. So you've got somewhere where you can instantly, even now on your Zoom, or wherever you are driving in the car, wherever you're thinking now, somewhere you could go to regularly, safely, every single day, near to your home, near to work. And then have a think that if you had that ability to always go and travel to somewhere a bit further away, that is that more traditional woodland, where would that be? And where would you go to be? Where would you go to sit? What would you go? Instantly now, I'm actually having a few flickering images myself of places I could go. So I do this all the time, but it still happens to me. I have these kind of safe places in my mind all the time, but these are places I'd go to. And there's a lot that, firstly, these are places you should be connecting to and engaging with as regularly as possible. Mindfully breathe through your nose and spend that time with them, hopefully up to 30 minutes a day. You can split it up, but it accumulates. The magic 2 hours a week, but also the fact that you've just gone through that process now at this moment will have been calming. So even when you're sat in that meeting and everyone's shouting at each other, if you can picture in your mind's eye really clearly, and that is that point. And if you can't, find some and do it. So that even when you're sat in that meeting with people shouting and it's all arguing and there's no resolution coming along, you've got that space you can immediately picture, and it has a phenomenal impact on your nervous system. Keep breathing, keep thinking of those places, and they're stunning. As we connect to those places, there's much bigger story that can then come from that, because I think that reconnects us to the world. And if we can reconnect to the earth, we can start thinking about terraforming it, which I mentioned earlier. These different acts of kindness you can do to these places, the litter collecting. There will be people that meet there to look after those spaces, so join them every so often and do a little bit once or twice a year, that little bit of payback all the time to the world, and that reconnects us to the planet. And if we then want to nurture it and improve it, and it all, that's where we can then engage to do that. A lot of the issues that we face in this world, actually, the answers are already there, and you can conjure them now. And if you can sit and you can feel it, then that's good for you. It's good for your family, good for your community, and ultimately good for the planet.
And that is well worth the nuggets. Those really, really good advice, good tips, and something that is practical and that we can all start to do if we haven't already. And so thank you so much for that. That makes a lot of sense. Simple tools. I love simple tools because simple they work. So how can people find you? They're now thinking, wow, I need to speak to Robert to find out a bit more about how can I go about this. So how can people find you?
Now, Hawke and Heath, we have a website called hawkeandheath.co.uk. Hawke and Heath is also on Instagram. I will promise you, we're going to have videos all about spaces that are predominantly brown and how good they are for you. Because our aim within our Hawke and Heath Instagram, you'll begin to see we're trying to spread where we are working. We're talking to lots of other guides. All these people, there's so many people out there with real sort of nature connection, and we're beginning to talk to them. So hawkeandheath.co.uk, you'll begin to get from our website a concept of where we're all going. Just put Hawke and Heath on your app store. You can download it, have a look at it. You'll see the free content. Hopefully you'll like it. hawkeandheath.co.uk, Hawke and Heath on Instagram, Hawke and Heath app, and then one more, Hawke and Heath TikTok. We do fun things. We've got an Etsy shop as well. And I know there's the big teacher thing coming out where we've got loads of PDFs and stuff, and we're adding to it all. So yeah, we would love to talk.
Thank you so much for your time,
Yes.
for your energy, for your wisdom, your knowledge. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be having you on it again in the future to see where you're at, what's happening, any new things happening in the forest bathing world. But thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And for our listeners, if there's any questions that you have, or what experiences have you had with nature, whether you in a cold climate where it's snow and frosty, or dry climate where it's brown and sandy, and anything in between, what experiences have you had? We would love to hear your thoughts, and your thoughts on forest bathing, whether you do it or it's something new for you. Share with us in the comments and let us know how you get on. And until next time, we'll chat to you soon. Thank you so much. Bye.
If you enjoyed listening to our conversation, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe. We would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and write a short review.